Hello and welcome to my project. As you might have already learned, my project consists of two pieces. The first is a brain map, which you can see here before you, and the second is a series of movies. Now, both of these address course themes. Often they address different course themes. One of the main themes that both this brain map and the movies address is systems, and how both the systems of other vampire movies, other movies that resemble the film that I started by looking at, which was the Twilight on my iTunes, as well as the systems of the people and the history it exists in, and also the culture and response that people have to this particular movie. And I apologize in advance for my voice because I just came out of surgery, and they took some glands out of my throat, so my voice is very hoarse. But don't worry, the movies I all made before my surgery, so I don't sound so raspy. Just this one. Okay, so let me briefly give you a tour of the mind map. Now, unfortunately, it is impossible to post one of these mind maps online unless you have a PC, which I do not have. I've got a Mac. So I can make one, but I can't show it to you in this format online. There's another format that it will be available in, which is an interactive outline. But I know this format is kind of the coolest. So basically what I've done is I have posted the link to this file and also the website where you can download for free. It's an open source software, the mind mapping software that will allow you to view things like this, but also create your own mind map. So I do highly recommend that you download it and look at it, because it's fun to look at it in the mind map way. And then I've just found it to be an incredibly useful piece of software, so it's really nice to have on hand. Even though this is the first mind map I've done, I can see myself doing a lot more of them from now on. So, just to give you a brief overview of the mind map, and also some of the main concepts I've covered, I started out and I had a lot of things that were a little bit too much about my own personal experiences, so I took some of those out because it was getting quite big. Alright, so just to show you some things that I've talked about. Over here in this bubble, and in this mind map I put bubbles around major kind of focuses that I've got. I look at how the Twilight movie, it's on my iTunes account, and that led me to look at how iTunes and the system in which iTunes presents its movies to the viewer and to the purchaser, and organizes your library, how I believe this is reflective of certain trends in our culture, especially how industrialization and standardization has led us to these very interesting ideas of customization and what we consider to be customized, even though it's just a variation on a standard theme. Down here I go into a little bit, sorry about that, my computer just jumped. Down here I go into a little bit of detail exploring my own personal purchasing habits, which is very interesting. There are some personal things I've kept. Okay, so looking at some other bubbles, I'll start by going up to the top here. So up here I am exploring probably the longest personal connection I have to vampires, which actually happens to be my godmother's dogs. Yeah, but this is where it gets more interesting. So in both this bubble and this bubble down here, I was really trying, with this one up here and this one down here, I was really trying to explore vampires as they related to gender politics and our current conceptions of female and male roles, the discussion of how we portray in our culture and think about romantic relationships is up here, and then more generic gender politics down here. Those are the two things I was focusing on. So I spend some time trying to look at that and really see what vampires show us about our culture, because which I think vampire stories have a lot to show us about how our own culture thinks. And I think that was absolutely fascinating. I also discuss in this middle bubble here how I believe the Twilight series interrelates with a couple growing themes in online literature, and also how people look at characters and character development. So I try to touch on literary theory a little bit here, particularly a growing phenomena which is called the Mary Sue character. It's really just become well known within the last 15 or so years, and its popularity, or more its use, is increasing quite rapidly. And I wanted to see if I could find out what that said about our culture, which is a good time for me to mention that in a lot of these I pose questions and I have no answer to the question. So, I started out with the questions here, and I ended up just multiplying my questions. I think I came to some tenuous conclusions, but there's a lot of things I just don't feel prepared to answer. So this is the last bubble I'll briefly talk about, and this is focusing on vampires in the system of vampire movies and other literature. I really wanted to know the answer to the question of what makes something a vampire, what makes something a story about a vampire. Because a lot of vampires, it's not a list of characteristics, because a lot of vampires don't have what we would normally think of as necessary things for a vampire, such as some vampires don't drink blood. A lot of them, especially in modern literature, do not sleep in coffins. Nowadays, they're not even all evil. We've got good vampires. So this definitely isn't the vampire of ancient legend, but we still consider these new pieces of work, these new inventions of the vampires. So I came to the conclusion that what defines a vampire isn't its characteristics, but its similarities to works that already exist within the category we call vampires. So basically, it's the fact that it's similar enough to something that's similar enough to something else that's similar enough to something that was the original vampire in Western lore. So we've kind of created this amorphous cloud that's ever changing and growing in new directions. Even though the new vampires don't share much in common with the old ones, there's a chain that links them back, and there's similar qualities, and we look at these qualities and we recognize that this thing is a vampire. So here I've tried for this project to read as many of the original works of some very important vampire novels. I haven't been able to read all of them, obviously, and I've never actually read a single book with a vampire in it before this, except the Dark Tower series. So this was quite an interesting experience, and I also watched as many vampire movies as I could get my hands on. So here is a list of the books and movies. There's a couple books which I did not read, especially the older ones written in German, because I can't speak German. And for those, I found some online summaries and read the back of the books, and a couple essays that people had written about those books. But I tried to dissect the most important characteristics of the vampires. And these lines you can see coming out here are connecting different vampire themes. I tried to trace it back in terms of time, so that, you know, if this is a theme, it came from this much earlier work. So here you can see there are a lot of interconnections, and these aren't even all of them. I mean, it could have been huge, and then you wouldn't have really been able to see it clearly. But there's a lot that connects these works, even when the works are very, very different. So that was a very interesting exercise. Now, as I said, viewing this in this map format will not really be possible unless you would like to download the FreeMind software. But it will be possible to view this in an interactive outline format directly on the website. So right now I'm going to show you that. So here you can see is the interactive outline, and it controls all the text and links that are on the original brain map. The only difference, of course, is that this is in an interactive outline format. So here you can see it's quite long, so I do apologize, but there are a couple ways to interact with this format that I will show you in a moment. That will make it a little bit more accessible and interactive. So just jumping back to the beginning here, up here in this corner you can see there are the expand and collapse features. If you collapse the map, this will allow you to really explore it. So let's say we open up the main title. Here are some questions that I looked at first. So yeah, let's look at why it's there. Well, okay, so here are some things. Why do you enjoy watching it? Oh, so let's look at the gender politics. You can say, okay, well, what about this? So as you can see, you can really explore, but of course you can go on at any point, open past things. You know, you didn't look at that. So it is easy to miss material, but that's what the expand is for. But it doesn't really matter. This allows you to look at what you find interesting. And there's another very important feature I need to point out. So let's say you're looking at the list of vampire movies. Now, just as in the brain map, you could see arrows and lines linking concepts. Here there is a different linking system. So let's say you're looking at Interview with a Vampire. You say, oh, becoming a vampire is a choice. I wonder where that first appeared. So you just click on this little button and it will show you. Oh, okay, so this was the previous instance. And I know here the movie is only slightly before, but of course the book was much earlier than Anne Rice's books. So here you can see there's another theme. Well, defying God is key to becoming a vampire. That's interesting. So let's look at this. Where's this first from? And we can see it's first from this 1748 poem. So this really allows you to explore the concepts. So just expanding the mind map again. So if you ever get lost, you can expand or collapse it. So this is the other way to view it, and this will be accessible without downloading any software. So I hope you have fun, and remember there are also videos, and just as down here I've talked about some movies like Interview with a Vampire, I've also included in those videos where I discuss course themes, and I also discuss some insights I've had. In these videos I include clips from many movies, many vampire movies, and I've designed these to be both instructive and hopefully very funny. So I sincerely hope you enjoy examining the project, having it be interesting and fun was one of my main goals. So thank you.